So can you just start by telling us who you are and how you spell your last name?
Mike Peel, P-E-E-L.
Cool, thank you. So, have you lived in Saugatuck all your life?
I was born in the Kirby House in Douglas in 1953. That was the old hospital, the corner of Center Street and Blue Star.
And how long has your family lived in this area then?
My grandfather and grandmother moved down here in the 30s. My grandfather was a truck driver with his brother Clyde Peel, who formed Peel Brothers Trucking out of Grand Haven, which was pretty well known. Well, Clyde stayed in trucking, and my grandfather came down and became a commercial fisherman in the 1930s, probably mid to late 30s.
What are some of your earliest memories about the town of Saugatuck?
Growing up in town, yeah. Well, we used to wait for the tugs to come in. When the fishing boats came in, they had Kallenberg motors, and they were like single lung motors that had a real pook, 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 pook sound that you could hear for miles. And another thing, they blew smoke rings, like the old tugboat smoke rings, which was really cool. So when we'd hear that, it was time to head down to the dock and help out, and I started doing that at about 10 years old. We'd go down and we'd help them take smoked fish off the racks and just do general chores around the dock. But our reward for taking smoked fish off the racks when they would smoke them is they'd give us a couple smoked fish and a bottle of pop and let us play on the net reels. I don't know if you've ever seen net reels for gill netters, but the nets used to be made out of cotton instead of nylon, so they would rot unless they dried them before they put them away. And they were these big reels that they would wind the net up on. So we would go get in there and somebody would spin you around and around, and that was what we did for fun.
So, what do you think have been the most significant changes, not to the fishing industry per se, because we'll come back to that, but to the actual area itself, to Saugatuck and Douglas?
It has always been a tourist area since I've been a child. It seems to be that the tourism seems to last longer. When I was young, it was only Memorial Day to Labor Day, and then you didn't see very few people from out of town. It was just locals at that time. And now that tourist industry starts much earlier in the spring and runs clear to Christmas, which is nice to see. And there were fewer shops and not as upscale shops and restaurants as there are today.
Why do you think there are more upscale restaurants these days?
Well, we've become, always have been a playground for Chicago, but, you know, there's more people in town with higher incomes, and now we have a lot of people that do day trips from Grand Rapids and Lansing and other areas, and everything's very nice. I'll tell you, the theater now is amazing downtown, and the shops are great, and a lot to draw people into the area.
So I wrote this question not just for the show, but because I really wanted to know. I remember us coming here for the first time. So we're on the lake. Why don't we have a decent lake or seafood restaurant in town? Because
there used to be. When we had a thriving commercial fishery, we would have fresh fish available for the restaurants. Now, even though we have a lake with lots of fish in it, they can't be sold. The ones you go out catch, sport fish, can't be sold commercially. So all the fish is just flown in or wherever. You might as well be in Des Moines, Iowa. You know, it's not fair. If we were, like, let's say in Florida, down in the Keys, well, they have great seafood restaurants, but the shrimp boats come in, there's fresh shrimp, and the lobster boats come in, and they bring grouper and snapper and all these things that are right off the boat. We used to have that when I was a child, but not anymore.
kid playing in the net reels, how many boats were pooping their way into the harbor each day?
Yeah, they did. Oh, you had, when I was a child, commercial fishing boats had already, there's fewer of them than there was like in the 30s and 40s, but there was probably about 8 to 10 commercial fishing boats in town.
Wow. And so what happened? Why is there no commercial fishing industry anymore?
Well, it was compound. First thing that happened was when we opened the Welland Canal up, and which opened the Atlantic Ocean to the Great Lakes, the sea lampreys came in and devastated the commercial fishery. It completely wiped out the lake trout. If there wouldn't have been lake trout that were landlocked in Torch Lake, they were able to reintroduce, they would have been gone forever. The whitefish were almost gone, and the commercial fishery died out at that time. There still was fishing for chubs, which were used for smoked fish, and perch weren't affected so much by them. There was still some perch fishing, but a lot of the commercial fishing was gone shortly after the war.
So now, why are you not allowed to sell the fish that you catch these days?
Sports fish?
Sports fishing, yeah.
Sports fish can't be sold for commercial use almost anywhere. They have to be caught by a commercial fisherman, and then that facility that has to be licensed to sell them. There are still some commercial fishing in Michigan, non-tribal commercial fishing. There's about 30 trap net licenses. Most of them are up north, up in towards the straits.
Now, is that kind of ban on selling what you catch, does that also apply in hunting? Because I'm thinking that we have a lot of upscale restaurants, and again, there's no pheasant or game on those menus,
Right.
even though we have pheasant farms and shooting within the area.
They would have to be raised for human consumption, even at wild game restaurants. Somebody didn't go out with a hunting license and shoot an elk, and that elk doesn't end up on the menu. They were raised for human consumption.
Do you think that's a viable kind of new business for this area? Do you think that would
With
would
wild
come back?
game?
Yeah.
It could be, yeah. A lot of regulations, but, you know, the state really regulates what we bring in because it could spread disease to native species. So it'd be tough. Fish farming would be something I think would work, too. That was real big in the 70s and stuff, but it ended up mainly being done in warmer southern regions because of our climate. Fish being cold-blooded during the cold water, they grow very slowly. So it really didn't work out this far north.
I see. That's something I never thought about. But now, so when the commercial fishing industry declined, it was more to do with the declining fish population,
Correct,
rather than a government interfering and regulating.
Right,
For
at the
protection.
beginning. At the end, the interference and regulation took place. They banned gill netting about in the 60s, and they're pretty much all the gill netting was done. The salmon were planted, turned it into a vibrant sport fishing industry. When they stopped commercial fishing in Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin, those states bought out the commercial fishermen. Michigan starved out the commercial fishermen by putting them on permits, restricting the waters you could fish in. An example would be whitefish. They let us continue to fish whitefish with a trawl, but we had to fish them outside of 15 fathom. There are very few whitefish outside of 15 fathom, which is 90 feet of water. They like 60 to 70 feet of water, so that's the way it ended for us. That was about in 1980 was the end of the commercial fishing in this area.
So to get back to the declining populations, you said that they reintroduced the lake trout from Torch Lake.
Correct.
So where are we at in terms of the populations, the fish populations?
Well, they found a way to treat lampreys. They put up electronic barriers. Lamprey eels spawn in small streams. They stay in the stream bottom as larvae for about 2 years. So what they're able to do is the barriers will keep adults from getting into, like they're trying to stop the carp from coming up out of the Mississippi, keep them from coming into this body of water. But when they came up with treatment for the lampreys, they spray these streams with a poison that kills only the lamprey larvae. And they were able to reduce the numbers, and the whitefish, walleyes, lake trout have all made a major, major comeback.
Good, good. So now in terms of the fishing, the only fishing that takes place in Saugatuck now are the charter boats and the sport fishing.
That's correct.
How big and viable an industry is that currently?
Well, they've been struggling the last couple of years, not because of the fishing. It's the salmon and steelhead fishing is fantastic. And lake trout. These fish have come back to great numbers, and they naturally reproduce. King salmon do in the lake now, instead of having to all be planted. So there's plenty of fish. It's an economic problem with them. Fuel cost, the cost of running a charter have made it so expensive what they have to charge that it's limited the amount of people that can afford to charter fish. So that's what's hurt the charter fishermen, the cost.
Do you think there'll be any return of any commercial fishing, even on a small scale, say, now that the populations have responded?
I don't think the state is looking in that direction. I think they'll continue to trap net up north. I think the tribes will be able to fish in tribal waters from Grand Haven north, and they can sell those fish commercially. But I don't know if you'll see just where you can go buy a commercial fishing license in Lake Michigan.
Do any of those tribal fishing boats sell locally?
No, they're mostly up north. You'll see smoked fish and smoked chubs available. Real hard to get fresh fish here, which is the same problem we have with the restaurants trying to get fresh fish.
And what about your old buddy, Mr. Deependorse? Where does he get his fish from for smoking?
Oh, Deependorse?
Yeah.
Mostly from up north, and mostly whitefish from trap net boats. He has trouble getting chubs for that are used for smoked fish. I don't know if you ever had smoked chubs before, but they're really good. They are in a little bit of peril with the change in environment on the lake. Chub populations are very low right now.
So how long did you actually work as a commercial fisherman, or make your living on the lake fishing?
With charter fishing too, or?
With the charter fishing too, yeah. Yeah, if you want to talk about the commercial and then how you ended up in the charter fishing business.
Okay, I started on the dock when I was about 10 years old. Too dangerous to be on the boat itself until you're a teenager. My dad usually didn't have anybody under 16 or 17 on the boat, but at 13, you know, being the youngest son, I was expendable, so I went to work on the boat at 13. And, you know, mostly cleaning fish and sorting. I wasn't back by the winch and doing a lot of setting the nets, very dangerous on a trawler. So I wasn't allowed back there. But by the time I was 16 or 17, I was working as a full-time deckhand. When I was 19, my father had a heart attack, and I became the captain at 19 years old. So.
Were you the youngest captain on the lake?
Yes, I was. I was the youngest charter captain on the lake too, because you used to have to be 21 to get a captain's license. And when I was 19, they changed the age requirement, so I tested right away, and at one time I was the youngest charter captain on Lake Michigan.
Now, we all know about, nationally, about boats like the Andrea Gale who go out in the ocean, and we've all seen the Deadliest Catch on the Discovery Channel. Is that accurate? Is it dangerous to go out fishing?
It's very dangerous. One of the most dangerous things in Lake Michigan has always been fishing in the winter. When we trawled for whitefish, gill nets would catch whitefish pretty much any time of the year. But fish being cold-blooded, they get slower, more lethargic as the water gets cold. So if we could get out during the winter when the fish were lethargic, we could really do well with a trawl. And we'd catch up to a ton of whitefish a day when we could get out. But to do that, we'd have to break the ice down in the river and try to make it through the pack ice to get out there. The most dangerous thing was icing. Probably in an airplane too, but on a boat, the water's so cold as the spray goes on the boat, like probably you've seen on the Deadliest Catch. They have to take axes and mallets and bust off the ice because the boat will get top heavy and become unstable. So I've had to do that on numerous occasions, and one time it was so bad that the boat was just hanging. It was almost ready to roll over. It was getting rough. I had a crew member that had one arm, Bill Watts. So Bill, we put a rope around his waist, and he went up on the bow with no hand for himself. You're supposed to have one hand for the ship and one hand for yourself. He only had the hand for the ship. And he was up there with an axe breaking that ice off. I can still remember that. Wasn't good, but we made it in.
Wow. Is it more dangerous too because the storms kind of come quicker on the lake than out in the ocean?
Yeah, they come quicker, and anytime you get into very cold water, wherever you are, ocean or Great Lakes, the danger increases significantly.
How long can you survive if you fall overboard in that kind of water?
Not very long. Minutes. My dad, on all of his boats, he never lost a crew member fishing out of Saugatuck, but we've had boats that have. The Golthams, the whole family perished when their boat hit the sandbar. I think it was about 1942, and it was a new boat that was supposedly unsinkable. It was much bigger than all the other commercial fishing boats. So he went out in very rough weather, and when he came in, he missed the pier to the north side and hit the sandbar. Well, when they built the doors on the back of this boat, normally they were like this was a gill net, or the doors would roll this way. So you would you'd close them up when it would be rough. This boat, it had the doors opened in, and it had a 4x4 supporting it. Well, when they hit that sandbar, the next wave broke the 4x4, flooded the boat, and all the crew members drowned, all 5 of them. They were our next door neighbors, and all the men in the family were on the boat. So
awful. On the opposite side of the coin, do you have any fond memories of some of the characters? I'm sure that it was full of the docks were full of characters, salty dogs, or freshwater dogs. Yeah. We had some characters on both the commercial fishing and the charter boats, but especially the commercial fishermen, and some tough old guys. Rube Sewers was somebody that I can remember. When I was young, he was 90, and he was just a wonderful old guy and just as tough as nails. He'd go out in anything. One time, he came in over the South Pier in his commercial fishing boat.
the waves were so big, his boat went over the pier and ended up in between them. And then up the river he went. Just tough way to make a living.
I can't imagine. He sounds like a character from Dickens, Rube Stewart.
Yeah, Rube Stewart. There were twins, Rube and Frank. And fishermen are very territorial. They didn't talk to each other the last 60 years of their life because of fishing. They both had their own boats, and they were interfering on each other's grounds. So these twin brothers didn't talk for most of their adult life.
So when did you finish making a living in the fishing industry?
Oh, I charter fished until the 90s. And then for health reasons, I sold my charter business and went into the retail part of the fishing business. I worked for Big Lake Outfitters, and I was the one who booked the charter boats and sold you all the equipment and everything you needed to fish.
Oh, I didn't know that. And then where did the restaurant come into the picture that we're in now?
My family's been in the restaurant business since I was a child. The elbow room in Saugatuck originally was my dad's net shed. And in front of the elbow room, there were no boat slips. That was my grandfather's. It was called Clover's Landing. He had a launching ramp, some docks, and a bait shop down there. So my grandfather had turned the net shed into a restaurant back in the 60s. And my family was in the restaurant business until the 90s when they sold it. So.
Wow. And how long have you owned Waypoint?
We've owned the Waypoint since for about 5 years, 2008.
Wow. And I understand the elbow room's up for sale, so you might want to think about expanding. You can go back to the net shed.
Yeah, there you go.
Be a good name for the restaurant too.
The net shed.
Yeah,
that would be. Yeah.
So now, but you've moved on from raconteur, restaurateur, and now real estate as well. So, how long have you been a realtor? You said since 19?
10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
10 years. Did the housing market here really feel the effects of the recession?
Oh, definitely. Started about 2006. My first few years in real estate, the market was really booming. I got a real quick jump start, and it was good. And then all of a sudden, the housing crash came down in about 2006 and really showed up in 2008, 9, and 10 were the lowest times during the real estate market. About 12 months ago, prices had bottomed out, and then it started to recover. This last year, sales were equal to 2006 again, so the market has definitely rebounded. And inventory is really decreased.
Now, are you seeing the kinds of people that are buying, are they locals, or is it still the resort that's drawing people for second homes?
Well, there's two major buyers. Because of the low interest rates now, we're getting a lot of first-time home buyers. They're taking advantage of low interest rates and some excellent prices on houses. And most times they're able to buy a house and pay less for their house payment with taxes and insurance than they were for rent. So they're much better off. And then the other strong market we have is our second home market. And we've seen the best recovery in second homes, not out in the townships, but in the waterfront and in Saugatuck and Douglas cities themselves. That market is really going strong right now.
Is there a difference between the housing market in Douglas and the housing market in Saugatuck? Where do people kind of want to be, especially the out-of-towners?
Well, Douglas is getting some very nice houses, and has some new construction. The main problem with Saugatuck is pretty much built out. So Douglas has a lot of lots, a lot of wonderful building sites. Now that West Shore is starting to develop, Douglas has all that land between town and the lake, and there's several new homes being built there right now.
So do you think Douglas is going to kind of come up in that way because there aren't any alternatives, really, that this is where the growth is going to be?
Right. I think within 10 years, Douglas will be double the size of Saugatuck.
Why do you think people want to live here?
First, it's a small town that has a lot to do, and we just have a lot to offer as far as Lake Michigan, cross-country skiing. We have the Allegan State Forest east of us. There's all kinds of opportunities for people who like to hunt and fish or just enjoy nature. And then we have a lot of things to draw people in from the city, our theater, our arts. How many small towns can you go to and have so many wonderful restaurants? Except seafood restaurants.
Glad you added that. There's one of the things that people talk about all the time about Saugatuck and Douglas, and it's certainly something that I noticed as a fairly new resident, is the whole sense of community. I don't think I've ever lived in a place where there was such a strong sense of being a part of a community as a whole. Why do you think that? I mean, do you agree with that, first of all? And why do you think that is? I
agree with that, and it has always been that way. I mean, everybody comes together for the parades. Since I was a child, it's been that way. Friendly people, proud of what we have, and we like to share it with everybody.
That's great, great. Can you think of anything else that we'd like to add? Or is there anything else that you'd like to add to that you think we haven't covered? That was great.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been asking this just sort of as a random quick question, so whatever comes into your head. Do you know what the word Saugatuck means?
Saugatuck means, I think it means mouth of the river in Potawatomi, I think. I've heard many different things, but that's what I think it means.
Good. That's the one I'd heard too, so that's good.
Yeah. We used to be socked in. We couldn't, if we could only get out 2 or 3 weeks, we could make our money for the winter. Last year, I would have fished all winter if I was still commercial fishing. I couldn't imagine that. Never had that. Never had an open winter when I was young. So, you know, it's quite a bit of, I don't know if it's climate change. I think it is. But
no, in terms of the area too, I think what Randy was thinking about was how it's changed how it changes in the seasons. I mean, obviously in the summertime we're packed, you can't move. Have you noticed a difference in the way the winters are now? I mean, are there more people around? Is there more going on?
Yes. There's a lot more going on in the winter. It used to be, when Labor Day came, there weren't any tourists in town. I mean, it was dead. I've always enjoyed the off-season because when I was young, this was like spring break during the summer. It was bikers and college kids, and the bars were hopping. Now that it's more family-oriented, and the seasons spread out more. So that's been a big change. And people coming down from shorter trips, day trippers, are a big change here that I've seen now that show up spring, fall, and even during the winter. We get a nice sunny day, there'll be people down shopping in January.
Yeah. One of the first things that we shot actually was the Halloween parade in Douglas, and as you know, it's like thousands of people.
That is amazing. We've always had parades, but they were never organized like that. That is amazing. If anyone hasn't been to that, they have to go to at least one. It's something.
It is.
Do you have any Halloween parade stories?
Oh.
Yeah, you'll share?
Oh, yeah, come on, we want to hear it.
I've been in the Halloween parade a couple times, and it definitely interesting. People from all over and just having a wonderful time. That's one thing about this area. It's such a mix of people that when they come here, they have a tendency to all get along so wonderfully. You know, and that's always been a little bit of magic we have here.
Yeah, you're right, it is magic. It is magic.
Yeah.
That was a good question.
That was great.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, excellent.
All right.
Thank you
Good.
very much.
You're
This was
welcome.
great.